Today's speakers are Morgan Slade, Director of Product Marketing and Brand at Reonomy, and Colin Callahan, Director of Sales at Reonomy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Billy. Really appreciate the intro and wanted to thank everyone for tuning in today. Really excited to be here with my colleague, Colin Callahan. Just a little background on myself. So this is actually my 1 year mark at Reonomy, which I'm really excited for. Have been with the team for a year. Prior to that, worked in the data space in wealth insurance, wealth intelligence. And prior to that, worked in digital marketing in the financial services and art world. So I'm going to pass it over to Colin, who I work very closely with, and he'll provide a brief introduction as well.
Thanks, Morgan, and official congratulations. It feels like it's been more like 3 years, less so than a year. Although the slide did say VP of Sales, the previous slide, I might take VP of Sales over Director of Sales. I like that title a little bit better. But I'm the Director of Sales here at Reonomy. I started 3 years ago. I worked initially as an account executive, moved into a sales management role, and now manage the entire sales team all the way from pre-lead with the SDRs through the account executives in our sales process, and manage our managers as well. And as Morgan mentioned before, previous to this, I was a sales account manager at United Healthcare, a little different of a world, but really excited to be here, really excited to talk to you all about how we can help.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. So before we get started, just wanted to give a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. So the first area is just a brief overview of Reonomy. Colin and I are both really fortunate to work with a lot of solar professionals and to really hear their unique challenges and how Reonomy can provide a solution for them. So we'd love to give you guys a little bit of insight into what we're hearing in the space. Then we're going to talk a little bit about outreach in 2020 and what we anticipate outreach in the context of prospecting to look like in through the rest of the year and even into 2021. And then we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into the product that we offer, into our database, and a little bit of kind of how that can complement your workflow as relates to prospecting. And we'll give some examples of what that process looks like. All right, jumping right into it. All right. So as I mentioned, Colin and I are in constant communication and, hearing anecdotally as well, some of the unique challenges that solar professionals are, encountering in their day-to-day as relates to prospecting. So Colin, I think this slide really articulates a lot about the challenges that are most common. So I'd love to kind of hear in your own words a little bit of a breakdown of a few of these areas here.
Yeah, absolutely. So in taking 10 steps back and kind of going back to the foundation of what Reonomy was created for, back in 2013, Rich Sarkis, our CEO, former CEO and founder, he's now our executive chair, he saw this huge opportunity where there was so many different data points that were scattered across the stratosphere. There are so many different sets of data, public, private, that's out there, but there's not an easy way to access it. So that was the foundation of what Reonomy was essentially built on back in 2013. We were founded in New York. We really hyper-focused on that market, built out a use case within the New York City market. And then we decided, okay, what can we do and how can we scale it nationally and take it not just from, the 5 boroughs of New York, but let's expand that. And that expansion happened over the course of 2.5 years of research and development, building the product, a couple failures along the way. And 3 years ago, we officially launched the national product, which is what I was hired to do, was initially start selling the national product. And since then, we've scaled the company almost 4x. We have raised $128 million inception to date, 96 of which came in the last 3 years since we've launched. And a lot of that is building a robust system where we leverage big data partners, private data partners, machine learning technology. And essentially, instead of having to go and find and look for all this information in all these different spreadsheets or different websites and public data sources, we actually put them in a one-stop shop where you can essentially go directly to the website, directly to Reonomy, filter through all the information and find exactly what you're looking for. And specifically for solar and service providers, you have the ability to go in there and get the owner contact information right from the start. So not having to sift through all this additional information, try and find an LLC owner, Pearson, spend all that time doing it, but really just driving the point home and getting the most important information so you can do your job the most effectively that you can.
Absolutely. Really well said, Colin. And I think, this next slide around our national coverage, I think if Colin were having this conversation 3 years ago when he first started, a lot of these figures would have looked completely different. And I think Colin will articulate this as well. And I've seen it in my last year here at Reonomy that we are constantly in the process of building on our database, creating less friction within the prospecting process, and building out our data set to complement our clients and particularly solar professionals' workflows. Colin, any on this slide that you'd like to highlight in particular?
Absolutely. So I think the word that just stood out to me the most that you said, Morgan, was friction, right? Like there's a lot of friction in how do I get in touch with these owners? So way back 3 years ago, we didn't have these 30 million plus people profiles. We've done a really great job of mapping and identifying company trees, right? Giving you the ability to say, this is the true holding company of these subsidiaries that exist below these LLCs and before these hidden entities. And we've mapped all those, that company profile. So that 100 million plus company profiles, which ultimately is leading you all the way down to the 52 million commercial properties spread out across the entire US. So we don't specialize in a given, primary market or a secondary market or a rural area. We treat them all the same. So that 52 million that 52 million number in the top left corner, that speaks to the entire coverage across the US. And again, it's not just your primary or your secondary markets, it's everywhere. Like we treat the data the same, and the advantage of using machines instead of humans, we don't necessarily have a bias where we're going in and deciding what properties are a great fit and what we want to focus on. We just treat all the data the exact same.
Again, really well said. And so this is the view of what our database looks like. Really, to Colin's point, the depth and the breadth. So, the coverage in terms of number of properties that we really have coverage over. But then as you dig into those properties, and we'll show you a few examples of what that looks like in product, the idea that our database holds a ton of really rich information that really gives you the full picture on a particular property, on a particular market, whatever criteria matters to you. So now we're going to move into kind of the so what. Like, why does having access to these 52 million properties and in-depth rich data on them, how does that help you in your day-to-day? So I'll let Colin walk through a few different examples of what we really hear from solar professionals and how we really complement your workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's so many different unique use cases and ways and strategies that you're going about your day-to-day right now. But the biggest one that we run into is, how do I find accurate contact information for property owners that's not going to lead me to ripping out all of my hair because I'm frustrated and I can't find it, and I drove past a property, I Googled it, I found an LLC, and now I don't know what to do. The barrier to entry in finding some of this contact information beyond the network that you've already built and the work that you've already done through your referrals is the ability to go after additional new business, right? Especially in these given times and some of the uncertainty, taking back the power into your own hands. So what Reonomy really gives you the ability to do, and we'll go into further depth with this, is we give you the ability to search an area, whether it's properties that you know of or an area that you are already familiar with, and filter down by property type. So if you're focused on warehouses or multifamily buildings or you want to look at office, maybe malls, like whatever it might be, whatever your specialty or expertise is, you can narrow it down really, really quickly in a finite matter, and then lead you directly to the information that arguably is the most important beyond finding a property, which is right to the contact, right? Being able to see the phone numbers, the mailing addresses, and email addresses in some cases for some of these property owners, and then again, tying it to a bigger picture to see everything else that they own. So you're not just going and spending your time on maybe a 1 or 2 person or 1 or 2 property deal. You could see potentially if there's 8, 10, 12 properties under this one person's name, and it just leads to better conversations. And I think part of what we'll talk about, and Morgan and I will talk about on the next slide, is, you know, why is it important and what is the strategy moving forward once you have this information. But ultimately, everyone's challenged with the same thing. How do I get accurate contact information? And Reonomy just streamlines that process in a one-stop shop.
Absolutely. And I think even just to hammer that point home, so in these 3 buckets that we've highlighted around searching and being able to, you know, even search on a more granular level than just your region, and then also to understand contact information. So, you know, the traditional way of doing things may be to leverage a bunch of different sources. And I think many of you may have had experiences where you've had conflicting information, you've had confusing, you know, duplication of results or things that just don't match up. So for example, Colin had cited under filtering properties, the idea that there's a capability to understand classifications and different asset types. So, you know, the idea that if you are leveraging different systems, one system may be telling you one classification and another system may give you, you know, conflicting information. So I think that's really just to drive home the point that Colin just mentioned about it being you know, a single source that can really save you time and help you to conduct research and prospecting efforts in all of these areas. So moving on to, this is really the crux of the presentation, I think. So really, you know, you have all of this information at your fingertips. You have information to inform your pitch. So let's talk a little bit about outreach in 2020. So of course, we're living in, you know, different times. There are unique challenges to living in a global pandemic and trying to operate business as usual. So Colin, what are some of your observations about this time and what really moves the needles from a prospecting perspective?
Absolutely. So yes, data is on there twice and it's purposeful. The big thing that we've found in having a lot of these conversations and talking to both larger groups and smaller groups is this access to data and being able to make informed decisions on that data. But also having your research done prior to picking up the phone and contacting a property owner. There are a lot of different things that are happening in the market. People are being hit in different ways. There's a lot of empathy, creativity that you can bring to a conversation if you're educated on what's going on with that property, when it was bought, when it was last renovated, what year was it built, who are the tenants in that building, and you can do all that with Reonomy. I think the biggest thing that we've seen is playing it for the long haul. People are still relatively uncertain to what's going to happen in the future, and no one has a crystal ball, but there's a lot of different theories, a lot of different thoughts as we head into, you know, a recession, and some people are saying it's going to be a V bounce back. Some people are saying it's going to be a U-shaped return. The sentiment is that it'll return, but it's a matter of when. So playing and having these conversations for the long haul, in my opinion, is really going to be the most important piece when you're going into these conversations and having conversations, not just with the owners, but maybe you're speaking to some of the property management groups, and bringing that creativity and empathy. The one thing that we all have in common is we're all going through a global pandemic, and we all have had our own experiences. The other interesting part is a lot of property owners, believe it or not, are sitting at home and are kind of waiting or looking for a distraction. So we've seen a lot of connection rates with property owners. Now, do they want to do something on their property? Maybe not. Again, due to the uncertainty with the market, but they're home, they're in their houses, they're not traveling. They're not, they had to cancel their vacations to Italy and going across overseas or wherever they might be. So they're home and they're in their houses. And actually, this is a great time to connect with people with using that common ground and some of the empathy that's going behind the situation. And that's where data just comes back into that importance of the conversation. You really need to be educated. One thing that we coach every single person on is doing your research and doing your homework. And what Reonomy gives you the ability to do is really tie it back in and be able to look at all those different data sources that Morgan was referring to, and that one source of truth that you have all that information on before you pick up the phone and actually contact that owner.
Exactly. And I also just want to bring further attention to the unsung hero in this list. So we've talked about data twice. I think this point around playing for the long haul is another really interesting point to bring up. I think, oftentimes it can feel like, when we're looking at our priority lists to kind of act on the most immediate returns, the hottest prospects that you have in your pipeline. This point is really about the fact that it may feel slow right now. It may feel difficult to connect with individuals, but Reonomy can really complement your workflow in a way that helps you to build a sustainable pipeline. So while someone may not be a viable prospect for you right now, the more research and supplementing of your database or any way that you keep track of your deal flow, any supplementing that you can do during this time and outreach you can do during this time can help to strengthen those relationships for when they are ready to do business with you. So just wanted to hammer that point home as well. Moving on, so this is what I'm really excited for, is to jump into a practical example of how a solar professional may jump into Reonomy Professional, our core platform, or Reonomy Business, which allows you to leverage the platform for an organization or a team. So Colin, do you want to just walk us through a little bit of what a prospecting effort, a life cycle might look like within the product?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a screenshot of what you would see when you first walk into the platform and actually sign up for a trial or end up purchasing a subscription. This is the first thing you'll see. Is on the left, there'll actually be a bunch of summary cards, a bunch of things. But the one number that I want to highlight is there's 52 million commercial assets across the entire country that you can choose from and contact. And what we want to do is be very prescriptive in who we're going after and what we're doing. You can use the map, and the reason why I wanted to highlight the map is fully interactive. So imagine being in Google Earth and being able to zoom into a specific area, maybe carve out a neighborhood, do a radius search around that given asset that that exists, or given area that you were really interested in but just couldn't find information on, or didn't want to get out your car and write down addresses to go home and do research on. You can literally zoom into that given map, find that area, do a quick radius search, a quick area draw with our draw tool, and literally look in that area that you've always wanted to look at. But I think the real advantage comes in when especially with Reonomy and the filtering capability, is even if you did that, you might not be picking up things like you might know of one or two properties in the area, but you're leaving yourself short with everything else that is out there or in that area that you might service. So one of the things that in the next slide is I would recommend diving into and searching by a specific location, right? So one of the big things that we can do is we want to narrow that list into a more digestible, bite-size set of properties. So we're not just picking up the phone, calling. I encourage everyone to call 52 million properties, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen. And yes, you do have the ability to contact all 52 million if you really wanted to. It's all you can eat contact information within the platform. But we want to make this like I always equate it to finding the needle in the haystack. Let's find the properties that are really relevant to us that maybe otherwise we might not have seen and weren't within our scope because we just haven't driven by them or they're in an area or whatever. So what I would do, and you can get very granular with location, you could go all the way down to zip code. You can look at it from a city perspective. For the purposes of this search, we narrowed it down to the MSA, or Metropolitan Statistical Area of Phoenix. And right away in the top right corner, what you'll see is we have a live tracker that actually monitors how many properties will result in a given search. So you don't have to click apply or run a query. You literally see a live counter of how many properties will result in that search. So you don't have to go back to square one. If you ever hit 0, you know you added one too many filters and you need to go just undo what you recently just did. So for this, we'll do the Phoenix MSA. That gives us, I think, 366,000 results. Again, 52 million, just by a click of a button and typing in two things. We're now down to 366,000 properties just by clicking a button. The next piece that I would search by is actually property type. So as you can see on the screen here, I think there was actually a question that I was looking at before. What about residential private properties? So we define a commercial asset as everything above a single family home. So we have duplexes, triplexes, that 2 to 50 unit count that may not get as much love with some of our competitors, or might not have as much insight and eyes on. We cover and treat everything the same, as I mentioned before. So we actually have everything from commercial buildings, office, I mean, you name it in that category, to bowling alleys and really specific use cases with the special purpose. For the purposes of this, we did the multifamily category, and you can see how we break that down. Everything is in alphabetical order. If it's not on that list, it's probably in another segment. And if it's not there, we have a great live chat feature that you can actually communicate with our CS team. If you ever look at our Google reviews, most of the shout outs that we get is from that CS team. So it's a really easy, intuitive tool that you click on asset type, and you have the immediate ability to narrow down by that specific asset type and click on the properties that are relevant to you. So for this, we did the full category of multifamily. Again, in the top right corner, you'll see we went to from that 366,000 number all the way down to 16,000 just by adding this filter. So we're now 52 million down to 16 just by adding 2 filters, right? The next, I always like to work left to right when I'm doing the filters. So with asset type, or building a lot, excuse me, you can narrow down by the physical characteristics of a property. This could be lot size. This could be a year the building was built, year renovated, zoning information, all the way to unit count. Like however specific you want to get with the building and the property types, you can. I've had clients that they'll replace the roof of a given property if it's in bad shape. So they actually went after properties that haven't been renovated in a while, that were built back in the early 90s or 1900s, excuse me, and they'll go after those properties because they know that that's their specific fit. I've had people that don't want to install solar on a given roof, and if it's over a certain year, so they'll actually look at properties that were recently built and target those specifically. It all depends on your strategy and what you're trying to do in your offerings. But there's so many different applicable use cases when you're building your list and looking at this building and lot tab. For the purposes of this, we use the example of we want a property that has a lot of lot area that we can put maybe a solar in the back of their lot. They have a lot of extra additional land. So we said, let's look at properties that have a minimum of 10,000 square feet for the lot in the Phoenix area. Now, we can get very specific. We could put a combination of numbers in there. We just give suggestions based on the sizes that we see are most common. But you can type in like 23,500 square feet minimum to 55,233 square feet maximum, and we'll start populating results. So once we add this additional filter, again, we narrowed it down to 7,000, just north of 7,000 properties. So 52 million to 7,000, and I'm taking a lot of time explaining it. This is all within a matter of seconds. You're able to filter down the criteria to the exact properties that you're interested in. And the last thing for the purposes of today, I would suggest searching by recent sales in the last 90 days to a year. Some people might argue differently, but this is what I've seen the most success when it comes to solar professionals specifically. Do you want to contact a property owner that has held a property for the last 30 years, hasn't really done anything on it? They're kind of like, they're not really as invested as maybe they once were when they initially bought the property. what we've seen success with, and some of the best practices I've got from some of my clients are, they'll actually say, let's look at properties that have recently sold. They've already made an initial investment in that property. So let's go after the property owners where everything is very relevant, very new. They're looking at ways to be efficient, especially on their energy side and their costs. They're probably looking at their bills already. They're thinking about the mortgage payment. They have all this in the back of their mind already, and it's all very top of mind. So we can actually target properties that have sold within the last year or last 90 days or whatever your strategy might lead you to. But this gives us a really workable list of 181 assets of properties in the Phoenix area that have sold in the last 90 days that have a minimum of 10,000 square feet of lot, and they're in that multifamily asset type. So all by literally checking off a couple boxes, we're down to 181 properties that otherwise, quite frankly, would be difficult to find, right? Like, we always bucket things into 3 different categories. It's how do we discover properties, how do we perform research on that given asset, and how do I conduct outreach? And you're able to do literally all of those things right within the platform, right within this one-stop shop that has that single source of truth. And I'll actually go into like some of where we get our data from as well, because I'm sure there's questions around that. We use a combination of public data. We then use private data. Now we have the ones that we can name that we have exclusive relationships with are Dun & Bradstreet, CoreLogic, Black Knight, and Info Group. And then we have a handful of others that we can't disclose. But we have these basically private data partners in addition to some Secretary of State information, some higher level information that we're also filtering in. And we're just my engineers would kill me the way that I describe this, but we basically put it in a blender and put it in a fine-tuned tube, and it picks and chooses with, imagine like a fingerprint for each property that's coming through. That fingerprint is unique to that given Reonomy property within Reonomy, and we combine all those different data sets to that unique thumbprint and then show you the thumbprint with all the different data sets behind it. And you're just seeing the thumbprint with all the information that's laid out really nicely and gives you the ability to perform your research really quickly. Whereas before, you would have to go to all these different disparate data sources and have to click on each individual website. You just can do it all from that one spot. And you're just looking at what we basically have put there. So it gives you the ability, once we have these 181 properties, on the next slide, you can now just pick up the phone, look at the building and lot information. Look at I think there was a question around from Boris Feldman. Do you have lease rates available as well as purchase dates? So purchase dates, yes. So we can actually look at properties when they purchase. We can look at the sales history. We can look at if there was a deed transfer within that property. We can get very granular within that category, within the sales category. We can also look at debt. We can look at if they've taken out a recent mortgage. We can look at the tax information on that given property. Maybe there's some incentives that go along with your programs as well, and you can help them reduce their taxes. But ultimately, we're giving you this one place where you can do all your homework, do all your research right here within the platform, and give you the ability now to pick up the phone and call Stephen Fishman, who actually owns this property. We have phone numbers here, we have email addresses here, and we have mailing addresses. What's great about Reonomy is we don't just give you one mode, right? There's so many different ways that you can contact these property owners, and we basically give you a 3-prong approach. You can pick up the phone and start calling them. We have a mailer module built in the platform, so you can send direct mail campaigns right from the website. That's integrated beautifully. Our engineers spent a lot of time on it. We got a lot of user feedback on it, and they really nailed this. You basically have the ability to push either your content or create content within Reonomy and send it directly to these property owners. And we've done some verification on the actual mailing addresses to ensure that it gets delivered and that the mailing address is a live, active mailing address. So you don't get some of those super frustrating return envelopes, which I've sent direct mail, and it's the most frustrating thing that you can do when you have, you put all this time, work, and effort into into a physical mailer, and you send it, and it gets sent back 3 days later because the address wasn't right. So we've done a really great job from a mailer side, and you can send the direct mail. And then if worst came to worst, I would never tell someone or steer someone. I would use this from an email perspective as like, hey, I've tried this person 10 different ways. I'm going to send them an email on a one-off basis. If you're sending mass email campaigns, I don't necessarily think that's like Reonomy's best use case. I really think the mailer and the phone numbers, but we do have that one-off. If you're sending a one-off email and you're like, hey, I've called you 3 times, have you gotten my voicemail? I think using Reonomy for those email addresses is arguably one of the best ways that you can do your additional follow-up, and it's just another layer that you can conduct some of this outreach. The last thing I'll touch on this page, and I'm sure Morgan has a million things to fill in all the stuff I missed, but like you can actually click on Steven Fishman's name right here, and we'll pop you out into another window, and we will show you all the properties, regardless if they're hidden by an LLC, right? Steven might have multiple LLCs covered for each one of his property because he's super sophisticated and he doesn't want anyone to know how many properties he owns. What we can do is we actually go beyond the LLC, look at Steven Fishman, look at his name and look at the address that he's associated with, and tie every other property that he owns, all with a click of a button. So you now know, we go back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, data being very important, doing your homework, being creative, having this additional research, and also playing for the long haul. It all comes into play right at this moment. You can now pick up the phone, have a conversation, a very educated conversation about when they bought the property, the debt, the tax information on their property. You're physically looking at the building because we have a direct integration with Google. So you can see the roof lines, you can see the weather marks, you can see so many different aspects of the actual building and the asset, in addition to the lot, that you are physically looking at the building, and you're picking up the phone and calling this person. And let's say he doesn't want to do a roofing job on this particular building, a solar job on this particular building, you now know the 10, 15, 20 other properties that Steven Fishman now owns. So, okay, well, what about this property? I guarantee you he will be flabbergasted at the fact that you have now not only picked up the phone and called him and know all this information about this one building, but now are calling about the other buildings, which he did such a good job and thought he did a good job, right, of hiding that information from you, so you didn't know about the other buildings. So there's so many capabilities and there's so much power all at the click of a button within this tool. As you can see, I can talk about this for hours and hours and hours. Unfortunately, we only have an allotted amount of time, but the main use case here is, and again, I'll bring it back to the main pain point. If you're looking at a really streamlined process, an easy way to get in touch with property owners and find accurate contact information, Reonomy is the place for you.
Absolutely, Colin. I think that was extremely comprehensive. I think you touched on a bunch of really relevant points. I think one thing that I will reiterate and that I'm a firm believer in, is, so Colin had outlined the 3 different mechanisms for getting in touch: phone, mailer, and email. And I just want to reiterate and drive home the point that you really can't discount the value of having this information at your fingertips, right? So, we've all been on the receiving end of, being, receiving direct mail or receiving email campaigns and, tossing them out when they don't have any type of customization or personalization. And so really what this does is it puts you ahead of your competition. It helps you to cut through the noise. I know this firsthand as a marketer, that's one of the principles of conducting outreach and prospecting. So really the value of taking the time to dig deep into the depth of information that Reonomy provides. And to Colin's point, it's one thing to prospect for new owners who you may want to do business with, but also furthering existing relationships. That's oftentimes opportunity that's right under your nose. So to Colin's point about if you're already engaging with someone, you're doing a wonderful job on install and they're happy with the product. The idea that, why not, get to know that owner, strengthen the relationships, use these different mechanisms to get in touch with them and continue the conversation. And that may amount to, additional business down the road in the long haul. Anything I may have missed there, Colin?
No, you nailed it right on the head. And it's funny, you forget so many things, and I'm so glad that we talk so much, because you're 100% right. I think that's oftentimes what people will do is they'll go in and they'll look up their current clients, and they'll say how many other properties they own, because we did a really great job with this property. So that's a great point.
Absolutely. Awesome. Cool. And one other thing I'll say is that, Colin and I both work really closely with the product team. We really do take into account a lot of input, and we, hear our customers come to us with some of the pain points they're experiencing in their day-to-day. And that's really what's driven a lot of these improvements that we've seen both in data quality and in the functionality of the product. The ability to send direct mail directly from Reonomy is a really great example of that. It was something that, was the genesis of that project was really around understanding, customers' pain points and what could really move the needle for them and save them some time. So we're always open to hearing feedback and continuing to iterate on our products. All right. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our presentation portion. We are more than happy to answer any questions. We have here also our email addresses in case anyone on the webinar has any questions that we don't get to, or if you have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking in front of the full audience, if it's specific, to your use case, more than happy to have a conversation. And then a few other things. So to access this recording, Solar Power World is doing a great job of, packaging this up and making sure that you guys have access to this in case you missed anything and want to revisit some of the slides or some of our comments. And then I would also encourage you, and I'll let Colin jump in as well, we do offer a week-long free trial. And it's a really wonderful way to jump into the platform, see if it's for you, really, go through the motions that Colin and I just went through around how to conduct initial outreach, try it out for size, test out our mailer feature, see if there are any, interesting things that you could find to really further your prospecting efforts. Colin, anything to add there on the trial?
No, it's a great way to get into the tool and start playing with it and using it yourself for your own specific use case. The other thing that I would suggest doing is walking through a demo with one of our account executives and having them actually do specific searches that are really applicable to you and your business and what you're trying to accomplish. Even if it's just from an education standpoint and you might not be interested in buying, it's worth looking at and seeing and getting a sense of what technology is out there that could really improve your business, especially, given the times and given that we're all stuck at home. You may as well have a tool that can help you, increase your business. So.
Well said. Absolutely. Well, with that, it looks like we have a few minutes left and happy to answer some questions. I see that Colin had jumped in on one of the questions earlier, but it seems like there are a few others that have come in, and you can feel free to continue asking them even during this portion of the presentation. So Billy, I will actually hand it over to you if you'd like to hit us with some questions. What have we got here?
For sure. Okay, yeah, just like Morgan said, please continue to submit questions during this. See what we got on deck. So first question, am I able to locate all of the properties held by an individual owner?
Held by an individual owner. So I think Colin had done a little bit of explaining on that piece. So to further existing business and make sure that you're really maximizing relationships with owners. I want to talk a little bit actually about a new development on our product roadmap that is currently, in testing phases and on the cusp of launching. I'm not able to share an exact date at the moment, but we are working on an enhancement around portfolios that owners hold. So that's really, pulling together the property view that we host in our product today, marrying that with the view from the owner's perspective, and whether that's a person or the company that person is associated with. So really what that's going to do is provide you with a full picture of a portfolio, its value, all of the properties that fall within that portfolio, so that you can understand, is this owner someone who I want to prospect? Is this going to lead to additional business down the road? Is there a prospect that has a certain profile that fits the archetype of an existing client that you have? So say you have, really good luck with owners who fit certain criteria. They tend to gravitate towards a certain asset type, square footage of buildings that they tend to purchase. So it really helps you to create an archetype and find other like opportunities. And we're really excited about this development. It's definitely something that's highly anticipated, and I think will go a long way in helping our customers to more effectively prospect. Colin, anything to add there?
No, I think that this has been a topic of conversation since 2013, is how can we get to this state, and the fact that we're on the cusp of this, and we have, our funding comes from some serious players, some Georgian Ventures, Sapphire, Bain Capital. They're numerous now, but a lot of the $60 million that we recently raised in our Series D was to make this plausible and possible. So I'm so ecstatic about this, and I think it's going to be a true game changer where you can start searching. So I'm glad you touched on it. I wasn't sure if I was allowed, because I tend to get in trouble with dates, so I'm going to leave it as soon. So
I think that's absolutely acceptable. I think soon is absolutely fair. Left up to the interpretation.
Yes.
Exactly. Billy, any other questions that are coming through from the audience that we can answer?
Yeah, for sure. It looks like we got a couple that came in. So, okay. So, quote unquote, owner matches are the quote unquote true owner, as CoStar would call it. Sometimes I see multiple. How accurate or often is this refreshed? Some of my initial searches as I'm getting started have left me unsure.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we update our information on a biweekly cadence, 2 times a week. Now, that is different sets of data, right? Like we are to some degree subject to the data sets and when they come in from the different reporting entities that we're pulling that information from. So when I say biweekly, that doesn't mean that everything is being updated on a biweekly cadence. It is dependent on the information and where we're gathering it from. But it's updated as frequently as we can update it, and we are subject to like the for lack of a better word, the public entities that are feeding some of the information in addition to the backlog of the private information. So I always say give it about, depending on the county, depending on the area, give it about 2 to 3 months to see some of the updates and changes in sales information in there. Sometimes it's 6 weeks. It depends on how quickly the sales transacted, and also just how accurate the reporting entities are. You'll run into the same issues with a lot of the county websites that you would have to go to regardless. It's like it's just a data issue that unfortunately the CRE space deals with. In regards to when you see multiple owners or multiple entity owners, it could be one of multiple things. It could be a partner. It could be a previous owner. It could be, there's a lot of different, I would have to see examples, and my email's on there, like shoot them over to me if you do run into a situation where you have multiple owners, and how do you decipher them? The big determining one that I always look at is, when you look at there's a box, right? And it'll say reported owner and reported entity address. If that address matches below the owner's name, you can most likely guarantee that is the right owner, because that is the reported entity address that is associated with that LLC or that reported owning entity. So I always look at the entity, look at the address, and then look at the entity again, and then look at the address. So that's my one piece of advice when you're looking at Reonomy and you see multiple owners, is just look for the address match. Morgan, anything I missed there?
No, I think that's great. I think just want to reiterate that our data science team is constantly working to improve the quality of data. I've seen tremendous improvements in the time that I've been here. And it's, always top of mind for us, and making sure that we're providing the most relevant, up-to-date information. It would not be fair to say that all of our data is 100% accurate. There are some complexities of operating in the data space within CRE. But I think that, we definitely, have seen lots of value in how our customers are leveraging what we do have. And it's something we're always striving to improve. So just to be completely candid there. That was a great question, though. Thank you so much to whoever asked that. It looks like we have two other questions that we can take. Billy, what was another one that came through?
Sure. So what is the pricing model? Is it a monthly or annual subscription?
Yep, great question. So everything is an annual commitment. So we ask for a 12-month commitment from all of our users and our partners. So we invest heavily in a CS team, and there's some also legal reasons in which we have to do so. But any data provider that you're going to run into is going to ask you for an annual commitment at the minimum. Maybe we have clients that often sign up for 2 years or 3 years. But the big thing that you can either pay in monthly installments for the 12 months, or you can we have two separate price points. One is for an annual price point, and we give you, you pay up front for the year, and there's actually a different price point where it's 10% less than if you were paying in monthly installments, and then there's a monthly installment rate. But if you get nationwide access, you get unlimited contact information, you get 1,000 exports where you can pull the contact information and the building details into an Excel file. Tenant information gets pulled out there too. So, and you get like I mentioned, you get nationwide access. So it's a fully encompassing nationwide product, and it's an annual commitment, and there's two different payment options.
Well said, Colin. And I'll also add something that we didn't touch on, but happy to follow up with anyone after the call just to kind of walk through other pricing options. So we have Reonomy Professional, which is a core product meant for an individual. For those of you out there who are prospecting as a team or reliant on, someone on the team who's most responsible for conducting research and gathering information for your pipeline, we do offer multiple seats in the form of Reonomy Business. And Reonomy Business, there are cost savings when you do scale up in the number of seats, in addition to savings when paid annually. So that's also, more than happy to chat with anyone who has any questions there.
Yeah, and Morgan, to your point, and something that I in hindsight wish we covered, that business functionality gives you the ability to collaborate and actually see each other's notes, be able to use labels, tag each other on properties, and especially if we've seen that adoption even higher now that people are working from home and not necessarily in the office and seeing each other, and instead of sending another email or getting on the phone, you can actually just collaborate right within the tool and see when people are taking notes and look at the labels within the property. There's a lot of advantages to having your team set up with a business. And as Morgan mentioned before, that professional license that I had mentioned is really for the sole proprietor, the person that's going out there doing the prospecting on their own and really is doing the full cycle. Whereas our business suite and our business solution is really set up for teams that are operating and have multiple business development managers or whatever you might call them within your org. So as Morgan mentioned, we're more than happy to talk through the different use cases with everyone individually and what makes the most sense.
Thanks, Colin. And yeah, I think that's a really great point. The optional collaborative functionality for those of you who do want to share information and make sure you're not duplicating efforts. So really happy you raised that as well. So it looks like we have time for one more question. I saw there was one last one that came through. Billy, would you mind reading that one out for us, please?
Of course. So is there a LinkedIn connection as well as the rest of the info?
Yeah, so there's not like a direct connection to LinkedIn, right? We haven't integrated with LinkedIn, though that's an interesting suggestion now that you're saying it out loud. But we do give you the ability to look up their email and just quickly look up their company or their whatever their LLC is or their name is right there, their actual physical name, in addition to some of their email addresses. So you can go in and do a quick search on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you can find them pretty easily if you had the two open next to each other.
Absolutely.
Morgan, I like that idea, Morgan. Maybe that's another thought. We can just add it to the roadmap.
I know I do have just a little bit of influence on some of the stuff that goes on our roadmap. So more than happy to raise that with the team. And, to whoever asked that question, more than happy to kind of better understand the use case and a little bit around how that's helpful for you, how we could maybe find creative ways to create those connections for you. So again, really great question. Really excited to hear that, everyone on the call, that you guys have questions. And if there's anything that we were unable to respond to, we're more than happy to reach out via email. And please feel free to reach out to us as well.
All right. So yeah, that's all the time we have for questions today. If you have any additional unanswered questions, just like Morgan said, feel free to contact our presenters on your own. This webinar will be shared with all of our registrants, so you may view it again at your convenience. I'd like to thank Morgan and Colin for being here, and of course Reonomy for sponsoring today's webinar. And thank you to everyone in our audience for participating. I hope you enjoyed our presentation, and we invite you to join us for more Solar Power World webinars in the future. And be sure to start your free trial with Reonomy by visiting reonomy.com/signup. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thanks, Billy, and thank you to the team.